up, everyone? Welcome back to another edition of the Apex the Podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, it has been a crazy, hectic holiday season. Hasn't been too much of the Apex the Podcast coming out. We apologize for that, but we are back right now. Champs is right around the corner. Japan is right around the corner. And we figured the best way to get everybody prepared heading into Japan is going to be going through all of the different groups, going through those groups and talking about each team individually and trying to figure out where certain teams are going to go right, where certain teams are going to go wrong, and overall predictions that we're going to have moving forward going into champs. So I brought on the best I could bring. I brought on the man JHawk, and I brought on Donnie, our own guy who's been helping us behind the scenes with some stats and stuff for the last couple of months. Jay, how have you been doing? How's everything going right now, man?
I'm doing great. Like I was telling y'all right before I started recording, things are a little stressful. I am on the grind. I'm working hard behind the scenes to get some videos pumped out that I'm very excited about. So yeah, it's a stressful time, but it's gonna be good.
Yeah. I think the Marvel Rivals time, taking time away from that, has that been difficult for you at all?
Marvel Rivals has ruined my productivity. I had a video I was supposed to get out like a month ago that got delayed for a variety of reasons, but I would say 60% of the reason is Marvel Rivals. So,
oh no!
We've been putting in the hours in. It's a pretty regular occurrence where I see the boys in the court and I'm like, I got to keep editing. But then I'm like, I'll just pop in and see how it's going. And then 4 hours later, I'm deep in a rank sesh. So. Yeah, it's been bad, but also really fun. So yeah.
How's that leaderboard climbing? Where are you and the boys at?
I mean, last season we didn't grind like crazy on ranked and so I got to like, I think plat, and then currently I'm like mid gold. So we'll probably get into diamond or something higher this season. We'll see.
There we go. And I think the only person who's put in more hours than Jay recently on Marvel Rivals is our own man, Donnie. Donnie has been deep in the Marvel Rivals as well. Donnie, how are you doing, first of all? And how excited are you heading into champs right now?
Things have been good, man. Say, besides where I live and it being about 0 degrees right now. So it is, that's a little tragic to say the least, but outside of that, we're doing good. Definitely excited for champs. Been watching scrims basically every day, as I'm working from home in quotations, working from home. But no, things have been good. Definitely excited for it. And, I think if you're not excited for it, I think definitely is the time to get prepared. It's going to be a crazy event for sure.
Yeah, and I mean, me and you, we haven't seen each other in a little while either. I got to check in with you. We're going back to the old style of how the Apex of podcast used to start up, which is just how are we doing? How have you been, my man?
I've been good. I've got nothing to complain about, and it's been a doozy of the past couple of days. There's been some interesting shenanigans, and I'm getting a little like his Watson treatment without having the his Watson view count. So that's not the greatest. I'm getting the cheating stream snipers, but without the ad revenue that should be coming along with it. And so I'm sure that since I'm getting the cheating stream snipers, that view count is just gonna be following shortly after, right? It's got to be.
Hope. That's the hope.
But realistically speaking, no matter like what goes on during my day, like when I literally just get to like walk upstairs, and then I see my son. He sees me, the biggest smile, and then he starts kicking his legs because of how excited he is to see me. And literally, no matter how bad my day could possibly be going, everything is like, just everything is amazing.
You can't
in that moment. And so I've got that as a nice little like emotional anchor for whenever the stream or content gets a little tilting. And so nothing to complain about. What about you?
Oh, dude, it's been going good. It's been going good. Yesterday, I entered the final year of my 20s, 29 years of age. I think it's been a good decade for your boy, but I'm going to go out with a bang. I'm going to do some stupid shit in the year of 29, and I'm excited for it. I also think, this year's been great. The Broncos made the playoffs. We don't have to talk about the game, but we do have to talk about the fact that, people thought we were only going to win 5 games and we won 10. I'm happy with that. It was a great year overall for those reasons and those reasons only. That's a joke, but there's a lot of good stuff going on. I'm feeling good. I'm feeling great. And I'm very excited for just this event. It's been so long since we've been able to talk legitimate ALGS Apex Legends and I'm just ready to get into it. Now, here's what we're going to do. We're going to go through each group. This episode might not be as long as our typical episodes with an interview, but we are going to go through each group, kind of pick everybody's brain about where they feel with some of these certain teams, and then we're going to throw them all out there sporadically, and then right before champs, you'll have all of the information you need going into all of the festivities of ALGS champs. So what we're going to do right now is we're going to start off with Group A. We've got Moist Esports, TSM, Cloud9, 100 Thieves, NRG, Exo Clan, Ninjas in Pajamas, Shadow, FAZE Clan, and Oblivion. Now, just at first glance, this looks like a very hefty group, some big names in that group. Dawn, I'm going to throw it down to you first. Wherever you want to start, a team that's surprising you or something you want to talk about, a storyline within Group A or within a specific squad, where are you looking at right now when you're looking at Group A?
I mean, you definitely got two of the heavy hitters, I think, going into this champs just based on pure form over the last couple months with Moist and TSM. Two teams that have definitely improved as time has gone on, had very strong showings in the BLGS, which is kind of the most recent. Even if some people consider that semi-competitive, it's still, competitive environment. So those are two definitely teams you want to keep an eye on. This is basically just the North America group, if you really want to call it, since you have 6 of the 10 teams from North America, which is kind of crazy to think that there's that many teams from one region. So there's definitely be some familiarity within these teams. But definitely just looking at the top, I think you have 2 legitimate candidates that could win this LAN, along with 2 or 3 other teams in Cloud9, NRG, and then the wild-carded 100 Thieves that all on the right day could also be in a position for that top 5, top 10. And if we get one of those kind of crazy 10-team kind of match point finals, might even sneak a win. So definitely, I definitely think there's a lot going on with this group for sure.
Jay, I'll throw it on down to you, and I kind of want to start with our first squad because we want to go through all of them here and the ins and outs of these squads. Let's start with the 100 Thieves because Donnie mentioned them, and that's one of those squads where, once again, they're kind of referred to as a wild card, and there's a lot of reason for that. There's past history has shown us they can be a wild card, but they've also shown us at times that they can be a dominant force when everything seems to go the right way. As far as your perception of 100 Thieves right now, where are you standing with them currently as a squad?
I mean, obviously, in terms of talent, you have the talent there, right? Like design, it's Timmy. We've seen those guys as a team in the past multiple times hit match point, be in a position to potentially win. And we're one fight away from taking essentially God spot both times and, winning 2 lands. So they've been there. You add in Jen Burton, who's like arguably a top 3 player of all time. Like outside of like Hal Zero, he's like in the debate with Reps and all these kind of other guys for that 3rd spot right there. And you could probably even make an argument that, if you want to put him in the top 2, if you take out the whole like IGL stuff, in terms of just like raw impact of a player, he's a stud. And so the talent's there. But obviously, the thing that a lot of people are focusing on right now is the cohesion, the chemistry. Feels like a daily occurrence when scrims are happening, that there's a Reddit post, flaming Designful, or some YouTube video of Jen Burton getting upset with, the arguments they're having, or people criticizing Timmy's IGLing. There's a lot of stuff like clouding this team. But at the same time, all of that stuff existed with the dojo. All of that stuff existed with this group of players the entire time. Like none of this is new. And yet when they get to LAN, they lock in. I've made this comparison before, but Designful is like Jimmy Butler of Apex. If you know anything about the NBA, Jimmy Butler, you can say whatever you want about his tirades on the Timberwolves and, how he plays and his stats in the regular season. When it's playoff time, that man is a different beast. Okay, he's more locked in than ever, and he performs. Okay, and so that's what this squad has done historically. And now you add in, like I said, Jen Burton, one of the best players of all time. I think the ceiling is winning a LAN for this squad, legitimately. I don't know if they'll actually reach that ceiling, but I do think that is their ceiling. The biggest thing that I still think they need to figure out, which has been something they've needed to figure out forever, is who's making the calls, Design or Timmy, because it feels like they keep teetering on like, is Timmy going to do it? But in the past, their best LAN performances have been Designful. I think personally, I would lean to Design just being the straight up IGL. The other 2 guys listening to his calls. That doesn't mean that you're not having input from the other 2, because obviously everybody has to make calls. But historically, we've seen Design's the best IGL on the team, including on LAN. So that's where I would go. But I think if they can figure out those issues, and when they get there, they could perform. Like I said, I think the ceiling is winning a LAN. They have one of the highest ceilings, I would say, of pretty much any team across the entire group.
E, do you agree with that? That's the ceiling right there for 100 Thieves winning a LAN?
I mean, come on. You already know I'm a fan of this team. I mean, I think it'll be really interesting to see how this LAN goes, because I will say that as like a team, this will probably be their, like, has the potential to be one of their worst ones that they've put up. But I mean, to put that in perspective, like, they've top 5 their past 2 appearances, correct? Or am I mistaken? Because, like, isn't it around, like, I think they got like 4th, like, I could be wrong, but like they've
last
been
year
popping
champs, whenever Design and Timmy were teaming, last year champs they got 4th, and then it split when I think they got 7th, but they were on match point and they could have won the last game.
Yeah,
it was definitely a top 10.
So like,
yep.
Yeah, so like they have proven time and time. I'll say they were one play away from winning
Yes,
both of those tournaments. And for a team like that, I think it'll be interesting to see how Jin fits in, and whether or not they're going to be able to have that same cohesion as they did with Enemy, especially given the short time frame. And so if they don't have the best LAN performance this time, if they decide to stick together, which I hope they do, I do think that this has like the potential to be the next like great team. If like everybody sits down, locks in, and gets to work. I am a little concerned by the lack of hours put in on the game from Timmy, from Design. Jin's probably put in the most amount of time playing ranked of anybody on the squad, and so we'll see how that goes. But they still, even with that being said, they still have plenty of time to really like lock in and prepare and get things done and ready. And I believe they are at that like LA compound. They're like spending time. I think that is going to be a huge benefit to them going into this, because the more time that you spend around individuals, just like the closer you're going to naturally get. And so the fact that they're having this like extended boot camp of just time spent with each other, I think is going to give them a huge boost going into it, which will hopefully make up for all of the downsides that I just talked about.
And I think it needs to be said, too, that with Jen Burton not playing with them during BLGS, that was kind of that time that they could have built during that period. Yes, it's not on a LAN, but still you're playing together. You're figuring out what works, what doesn't, especially during that BLGS when that really is the time for them to experiment. I think that is going to be the deciding factor of, can they make up that time? Doing things like being at the compound right now together is definitely big for them, because hopefully they can build that chemistry. They can go over VODs together in person and try to iron a lot of those things out. Because like you guys have mentioned, on paper, you're talking about 3 very decorated players at the highest of level. Obviously, Jen Burton being a 2-time LAN winner, and just like you guys mentioned, both of Timmy and Design being 2 top 10s here within the last year. So all the ingredients are there. It's just, can they mix it together correctly to produce the performance they need over a few days? Because they easily can have a top 10 day, but the teams that succeed at LANs are the ones that can put that together over multiple days. And so, you even see like a team like Navi, for example, they had a really good first day, but then they didn't come and have that second good day.
Wyatt knows about that first day.
Wyatt
knows about that first. Wyatt, he enjoyed that first day as much as anybody possibly could.
But again, like, and even another team outside of that, Alliance, for the longest time had that stigma of being a group stage team, and then they get to an elimination style format, they couldn't quite put it together. So it'll be interesting to see what they end up figuring out, what they can kind of put together on paper over multiple days. Because again, if they can figure it out, this again is a team that can easily win a LAN for sure. So we'll see what happens with that team.
I will say one last note on 100 Thieves, that if this team was getting ready for a Marvel Rivals tournament, they would be the team to beat.
Absolutely locked.
No question.
Absolutely locked.
They are rolling everybody.
because you even brought up like Jen's probably the one who's played the most Apex. The last few days, I've tuned in on Twitch and I just see Jen and Design are ranking every night, bro. The scrims get done, hop on Rivals, duo rank for like 6 straight hours. They're grinding Rivals too. So
that man Designful, I think any time that I've tuned into Twitch over the past 3 weeks, that man is somehow always 16 hours deep into a rank sesh.
yeah.
Like that man, like that man's Marvel's grind is just next level. And that man, he's got it on the keys. I'll give it to him. He does. He's a multi-input talent. No
For
doubt.
anyone who has played Rivals too, you know that when you play a character long enough, you get max proficiency, so you get a new little character icon. I literally hopped into his stream today for maybe like a minute, and he was just loading into a game, and you have to like pre-select your character, and he clicked like 5 different characters, and every single one of them had the max proficiency icon, which like that takes a long, like I'm talking like 30 hours deep on that one character.
Dude,
and he had
30
5
hours
of
deep
them.
on one character for Design is literally nothing.
I know.
He
And that's what I'm
clears
saying.
that
The
2
man's a
streams.
grinder. He's a grinder. And the crazy part is right now he's playing Storm, who he doesn't have the max proficiency icon on, but he's probably about to get it soon. So like he's a grinder.
Yeah. Enoch, are you ever going to hop on Rivals? Have you played it at all?
Dude, I've hopped on Rivals. I maybe have like 2 or 3 hours of playtime, and it's just not my game.
I feel that.
Like I can understand. Like I was never like a big fan of Overwatch, and I can see the appeal to Rivals, and I do think the ability of like taking these characters that the majority of people have like grown up with and then throwing them into a video game that you get to play is unbelievably cool. But for me, I'm too much of an FPS guy, and I think BRs have me by the balls. And I just don't think that like arena shooters just do any, like, it just doesn't hit the same.
Yeah. No, I got you. I was just wondering about it.
Yeah, I'm glad that I'm glad that like people are enjoying it and like have a game that they can like legitimately like have a good time on, because I mean, at least right now in gaming, like sentiment on Apex has probably been like the worst it's been for a while, which I think people are like overly negative towards it.
Agree.
But then if you look at Apex and you're like, oh wow, it's dead, it's falling apart, dude. If you look at COD, their sentiment's even worse.
Down bad.
They're falling apart.
We got Aiden doing NPC TikTok streams because COD is so bad. That is the state of COD of COD ranked, where their number 1 ranked player is ripping the NPC TikTok streams because he's done with the game.
I mean, JHawk literally announced he's just done. Like JHawk, like that man. I grew up watching JHawk playing competitive COD. That man is like, in terms of just the face of the brand of that game for like a content creator competitive perspective to casuals, it's JHawk. That man went mainstream, and he's not playing COD anymore. He's done because all the cheaters. It's just impossible for him to play. So I mean, Overwatch, like everybody's talking about how that's dead. Like people are just gaming right now is kind of in a bad spot outside of Marvel Rivals. Quite frankly, that's like the only game that's doing well.
Yeah, and anybody who sinks a lot of hours into their favorite game that's not Rivals, you're going to have a feeling that it's dead, when really just Marvel Rivals is kind of just in its own stratosphere right now. It's new, it's hot, it's fun.
It's fresh,
Yeah, it's fresh, exactly. Okay, so to round out the 100 Thieves breakdown and everything going on with them, I want to ask you guys a quick question, and just give it to me in, just a few sentences on how you feel this would go. If 100 Thieves wins LAN, what happened? What went right for them? And if they don't, what was the reason it went wrong? I'll kick it off with you, Donnie. You go ahead and answer that one first.
If they win LAN, it's because they found their own play style outside the common meta. And
that's such a fire answer, Donnie. Good shit.
And I think if they don't end up winning a LAN, it's because they didn't take the time to figure out their lane in this champs LAN.
Jay.
If they win LAN, it's because they unified together as a team under one vision. I don't care if that means a specific person's the IGL. It could be a specific play style like Donnie's talking about, but they have to all be on the same page. And if they don't win LAN, obviously it's because they weren't on the same page, but then that turns into mental turmoil because we know that so far this team can easily get out of hand with certain things. And if that happens in the group or bracket stage, then there you go.
E, do you have one?
I'm stealing Donnie's answer for the first question, and then if they don't win LAN, it's the same reason that Jay hasn't had his video out. Marvel Rivals.
Marvel Rivals.
I love
That's
it.
good. That's
I
good.
love it. Let's move on into the next team here. We've got NRG, obviously. We've got Nocturnal. We've got Fun FPS. And we have Gildersons. They are back together as a squad. They've been playing for a little bit now. But once again, I'll throw it on down to Don. Just kind of talk about this team and your perception of them overall heading into Japan.
I think they're definitely a team that is trending in the right direction right now. I think towards the beginning of the year, they obviously struggled a lot more. And Nocturnal and Fun kind of didn't really have their place, weren't really figuring out a lot of things that we're normally used to seeing them perform at a high level. And then they were able to bring in Guild here more recently. And I think that they definitely are showing a lot more of what we kind of come to expect from a team that has a Nocturnal, a Fun, a Hot Sick on the back end, and now adding Guild back in, who they've obviously played with before. I think this meta fits them a little bit better because I think they play well at a somewhat decent pace, but I think that the quicker, faster metas where it's like a lot of kills, a lot of people playing on edge, that doesn't really fit them necessarily the best. And I think that when they are playing bad, it's because they're getting caught out like mid-rotate and struggling to kind of get to their spots in zone. Whereas this meta now, it's a lot more about finding a spot a little bit quicker, playing more for that zone style because, one, it's so hard to obviously get the kills just because of the support meta. You can get reses off really easily or you can get respawns really easily. But zone is just so much more important now because, you know, you got Rampart being a lot more involved now. You got Catalyst that can bunker down areas and buildings a lot more, especially when we introduce E-District, which is a lot more about building play in these final zones. These kind of metas to kind of lean more towards IGLs that want to go play zone a little bit more. So I think right now NRG is a team that, I mean, I personally have them as a lock for a top 10, easily could be a top 5 or could win a LAN. I think Nocturnal's on a short list of IGLs that should be able to win a LAN here soon. You know, obviously the meta's got to work for them, but I think he's one of those ones that knows the game really well. You got Fun, who's an extremely consistent player that I don't think a lot of people talk about, and Guild, who I think everyone knows by now is one of the best fraggers in the game. Definitely a lot of good things, I think, for this roster heading into this LAN.
Jay, this was a roster, and at least for Nocturnal, this was a time where the last couple times it hasn't been what I think he would say was his best. There was some weird instances here and there. What's different about this team? Is there anything different? And can you see them in that same top 10 that Donnie can?
So, I mean, when you talk about this team, first off, we got to acknowledge that, number one, Guild used to be on the squad, and they were really damn good when he was. They got second in the Split 2 playoffs of year 2. Then they got 12th in the champs right after that. So not the greatest performance there, but still, I mean, they made the finals lobby. 12th isn't like the craziest, terrible performance. We've seen that this squad can perform at their absolute peak when this was a trio. Guild obviously leaves. The next year, Xset, they get Sykes. They do really good with him. Then they get Koifel, and that's kind of when the team had this downturn for a variety of reasons. They didn't make it into the Split 1 playoffs for Los Angeles. Then we go to EWC. At that point, they have Reptar. They don't do great there either. But then in Germany, like Donnie said, they kind of turned it around. And that felt like it was going to be a breaking point for a lot of people with this team. I think a lot of people started to kind of write them off, be like, Nocturnal, Fun, washed. Reptar, not the right third for them. It's just kind of over, right? But they made it to match point. If anybody remembers, I think it was game 8 that they almost won on Storm Point, where they were on match point and they could have won right there. And if they do, that completely changes the narrative for this kind of a team. They don't end up doing it, but still an incredible performance from them that really, I think, brought them back into the good graces of the public. And now you add Guild, who, you know, no offense to Reptar, he's a great player, but Guild, one of the top controller players in the entire world. Outside, I love to read the stat off to people. And unfortunately, Timmy has slightly ruined it. It's not Timmy's fault. But outside of Timmy, every single teammate that Guild has ever had, their best LAN performance ever was with Guild. So Sweet and Nathan with NRG, they got second with Guild. Fun and Nocturnal, they got second with Guild. The Moist Boys, Waltzy, MT, they got fourth with Guild. Each one of those teams, their highest ever LAN placement was with Guild. Then they add Timmy, they got 12th and 10th. Timmy obviously got fourth with, the dojo, so it's not his highest. But that just goes to show that Guild makes any team that he's on better. It doesn't matter who his teammates are. He makes them better. He gets them to their absolute peak. So quite frankly, I'm not saying this team's going to win. I'm not saying they're the favorite to win. But I do think that this is a team that is absolutely a contender to do so, because we've seen in the past that they were able to get a second place. And I know that this team has the talent to get on match point. It's just a matter of, like Donnie said, can Nocturnal, as the IGL, get them in a position to finally close it out.
Yeah, and I think that, once again, having that chemistry come back, people forget that Guild's time with Sweet wasn't his greatest. Like, it wasn't. I think there was even some talk about it just wasn't the right fit for him. So going back to a place where you're comfortable, where you've already gotten a second place before, that obviously makes things a lot easier going into quite possibly the biggest LAN that we've ever seen. And I think, like you guys said, I think this is a team that a lot of people are kind of writing off beforehand, even with the addition of Guild. And this could really be a dark horse that people aren't really looking at. For you guys who are kind of watching all the time, you guys know where this team's going to be at. But for a casual watcher or listener, this might be a team where you look at and you say, okay, I'm going to keep my eye on this one, just because this is a team that has shown championship pedigree in the past. There was a little bit of a lull, but now that roster is back together. And this is something that, you want to keep an eye on. So I'm excited for NRG. E, did you have anything on NRG?
I'm excited to see the boys back together. That's really all I got. I think that it's going to be really, really fun to see what they do. And yeah, I think that we have like the best chance to see Nock have the LAN that he's wanted to have in a while.
Perfect. Now I'm going to throw it back down to that question once again. Donnie, you kick it off. NRG wins a LAN. What was the reason they won it? NRG doesn't win the LAN. What was the thing holding them back?
I would say NRG wins a LAN if Guild has the tournament we all know he can. I just think he's a game changer, and I think if he is on top of his game and wins a lot of fights, it's going to make a huge difference. And I think NRG does not perform well or win a LAN if they fail to defend their spots in zone.
Okay. Jay, you follow along with any of those, or do you have your own?
I think if NRG wins a LAN, it's because Nocturnal is exuding confidence and does not hesitate when the moment presents itself to close it out. And I agree with Donnie on the defending their spots, because in the thing of the moment presenting itself and hesitating, it does feel like the moments where I've seen Nocturnal and Fun, whether it be any of their teammates, almost win, it typically felt like the moment that led to their downfall in that game was because some unexpected team flies in or something happens and they fail to effectively defend that spot. So I'm going to steal Donnie's answer for that one.
Okay. E, you got anything?
I'm going to steal both Jays. If anything, I would just turn it into like a hybrid of like, I think that Fun is like by far one of the best non-IGL MNK players who has ever touched this game. And then you have Guild, who's like undebatably like top 5 roller player. I think whether they win or lose, it's really going to come down to how Nocturnal shows up.
Okay, and then my answer is if they win a LAN, it's because Gildersons doesn't drop his controller whatsoever. And if they lose a LAN, it's because Gildersons dropped his controller about 13 inches from the table. And that really just spelled doom for everybody.
How many controllers do you think he'll bring to LAN?
Because if
he drops one, it's chalked. Say he only brings 2 rollers. that you only have one freebie, and then what are you gonna do?
Do you guys think that like when he's like packing, the controllers are going in the carry-on? Like we're not letting anybody else handle those. Okay,
Yeah.
that's not
I
going
would
in the
hope
suitcase.
so.
That's
Has to.
going in the backpack on the
Yeah.
carry-on. We're softly putting it under the seat because I don't trust it being put up there in
No.
case all of a sudden mid-flight the thing breaks
Nah,
open.
I think he got a ticket for his backpack to carry his controller,
got
so
its own
it's just going to
seat.
be in the seat next to him and just like under lock and key or something like that. I don't even know, but
strapped
that.
in as tight as possible.
yeah.
These are not falling.
Yeah. That's enough from NRG. And moving on into my favorite team, Cloud9. We've got Cloud9. We've got our IGL with Saucer. We've got Naughty as our fragger. And then we have Shubi added to the team recently. As far as at least the last time we talked about them, Shubi has now added onto that squad. Now, Cloud9 is an interesting one because Shubi is one of those players that is, at least the way we have talked about him in the past and when we had him on the show, he's one of those guys that I've always said was like a very solid anchor in what he was trying to do. And he's had some really decent performances, but will it work out with this Cloud9 squad? I'm going to throw it down to Jay first this time. Jay, your thoughts on Cloud9 C9 overall?
First off, for Shubi, kind of a little bit of a revenge arc. Got dropped by Bleed, despite a lot of people hailing him as like arguably the best Newcastle in the world. And it felt like Bleed didn't directly blame him, but it's like, well, clearly they somewhat disagree with that assessment that he is the best Newcastle in the world if they thought that he needed to be dropped. I'm not saying it's entirely on him because obviously they had the opportunity to pick up Yanya, and like Yanya's a demon in his own right, so it could also just be an upgrade. But at the same time, I have seen some comments and some Twitch chats from certain members of Bleed that did feel like maybe there's a little something there. So I think that's some extra motivation for Shubi, because I truly do believe that in terms of Newcastles, he's in that upper echelon. So revenge arc for Shubi. And then at the same time, Cloud9, I really do think that they've kind of gone under the radar in terms of like how impressive their year has been. Sure, they haven't had like these super elite performances, like about to win a LAN kind of thing. But remember, this was a team, I mean, you guys interviewed them. Like they were put together right before the preseason qualifiers, and then they just happened to win one. Then they go into Pro League, no expectations. Sure, they pick up Naughty, and that made the team look a little stronger, but still not a lot of high expectations for them. Now they're all of a sudden a perennial LAN qualifier. Like they've been to every single LAN this year, so they've had an incredible year. I think they just need to start to put it a lot more together when it comes to finals lobbies, because in LA, I feel like that was their best performance, but I think a lot of people correctly pointed out that they got a lot of beneficial zones. So I think that they can definitely make some noise if they can improve upon their play when it comes to the zones not pulling to them, and they're having to be a little more flexible and not take as good of positions.
Donnie.
Yeah, I mean, Cloud9, I think, is probably one of my two teams I'm most curious to watch, and the entire LAN. It's been really interesting to see them during scrims, which I know everybody doesn't put as much stock in scrims, but I think what scrims does teach us is habits that these teams are developing and patterns of play that they're going to try to follow. And I think Cloud9 has really built a good base for this particular meta, because again, I think when zone is a little bit more heavy on the mind and kind of more on the forefront of what most teams are going to be trying to play, I think they do a really good job of rotating quickly when they're on their game, I should say, because there's definitely some days where they're getting caught out early and mid rotates and falling to a lot more teams that have a lot more firepower when it comes to 3v3 fighting. But it's all going to come down to is if they can find the god spots like they can, because I think their biggest question is going to be how to sauce IGL, because he's one of those guys that is a big confidence guy. And I think why we've even talked about that a little bit, even during Split 1 playoffs, is that when they were on fire, because I know they didn't have a great group stages, I believe, back in Split 1 playoffs, but they really came alive during the elimination stages and in finals. And obviously, again, they got a lot of good zones, but you still got to play it. You still got to be able to hold down your spot. And sometimes when you get zone, it's almost worse than not getting zone, because you have to sit there for so long and hold down a spot. So I'll be really interested to see what they do. Again, like you mentioned with Shubi, I think he's a very underrated player. The Newcastle obviously has fit him extremely well. He's been a guy that's been grinding. One of the few guys that's been really on ranked for Apex still, while a lot of players haven't been. So I think there's a lot of good things that Cloud9 could potentially do. And one map with E-District being added, watch out for them on that map because they play that map extremely well. And there's a lot of teams right now that are still trying to figure that map out. So if it comes down to it, with that being, match point final and they get onto E-District and they are on match point, I would not be shocked at all if they close it out on that map.
Yeah, I love the point you made about Saucer. We've said it on the show a lot of times, but from watching Cloud9 so often, the one thing I picked up on was when he is confident and when he is, firm in what he wants the team to do, they typically do a much better job. But that's not always the case with him, and it kind of fluctuates based off of, recent game performance, understandably so. But if he can maintain a steady level of confidence throughout the tournament, no matter what happens with the team, I'm very confident that they will at least be able to make it to Sunday. I don't know if I'm willing to say that they are going to go out and win the whole damn thing quite yet, because first of all, I haven't been watching too much scrims, but I do think that with the team they've cultivated, there is always an opportunity for a team like this to steal the whole damn thing. So that's where I'm sitting at with Cloud9. E, did you have anything else on any of the boys?
I'm stoked to see Nadi back at LAN. I'm excited to see how he does. And I'm also very excited to see Shubi on this team. Jay mentioned it earlier. I don't know I haven't been paying the closest attention, but I know that Shubi, it seemed like he was kind of forced into that Newcastle role for Bleed kind of later than expected going into their tournament. And so I would say that it is pretty unquestionable that he's known as like the best Newcastle right now. I don't know if people would have said the same thing when he going into that last big tourney with Bleed. And so he's had an immense amount of time to progress and get to where he's at. And so it's going to be a nice little piece of the puzzle for Cloud9. And I'm excited to see how this team does.
Beautiful, beautiful. Now, Donnie, I'm going to throw that same question back down to you. Cloud9 wins the LAN. What went right for them? What was the reason they came away with it? Cloud9 does not do well in the LAN. What was the reason and what held them back?
I'd say Cloud9 does well at LAN if Sauce IGLs to the confidence and the ability that he should know he has by now. And they struggle at champs if they get caught out too many times mid-rotate.
That does tend to happen with them. Jay, your thoughts?
I think they do well at LAN. Kind of piggybacking off Donnie's, if all of them come out with confidence, because we know that's also been a thing with Naughty too. Very much a player that thrives when the team is firing on all cylinders, confidence is high. And I think they do poorly at LAN if they can't figure out how to overcome some of the bad zones, because they are a team that I do think is a little more reliant on that. But if they can overcome it, then things could be looking good.
Okay. E, you got one?
Not for Cloud9. I'm gonna piggyback. Donnie's answers sounded fire. Donnie's answers are always fire. I'm definitely.
See why I like this guy? You see why I like this guy?
Donnie.
This is why I met him at LA. I was like, this guy is too good. This guy knows too much. He knows too much. And we were just crushing Coors Lights. It was awesome.
It was so sick.
I'm going to say Cloud9 wins a LAN if we bring back the long hair from Shubi. Cloud9 loses the LAN if... I'm going to take Jays if they get caught out and rotate, because that does tend to happen. And sometimes watching them so much, I do, like you said, they do like to rotate early, but I do think sometimes that takes away from their potential KP that they get, because a lot of times they'll rotate into a spot and they just don't see anybody the entire game. And the first encounter they get into, dead. Because like you said, sometimes against that firepower, like 3v3, there are just teams that have a little bit more firepower than you, no matter what. And I think sometimes they run into that, especially on the last few lands. So I'm hoping that they can bounce back from that a little bit, and we'll see how it goes. Now, let's move on down into some other teams here. Let's go up to some of the bigger names. Let's go with TSM. TSM obviously is one of the biggest names. Donnie, TSM guy. We've got Verholst, Reps, and Zap. Donnie, I'm going to let you kick it off as the TSM guy. Where are you standing with this team right now?
I think right now, I really do think that they're one of the legitimate 5 to 7 teams that I think you can put as a contender at champs right now. I think just the way that they have solved their IGL situation when they first came in with Zap, I think has been a testament to not only the 3 players, but bringing in Talmadge as well. I think that the 4 of them together have really figured out a system that works for them, where it is a little bit more of a co-IGL system at times, but you do see that ultimately Zap is the one that is making the final calls for this team. And not only that, you have obviously Reps, who is obviously has the resume that he has as a 4-time LAN winner, dating all the way back to Poland and X Games to even more recently with Year 3 champs. And then you have Evan, who arguably is the best roller player. I know there's definitely differing opinions. But again, he's at least a top 5, I think, for most people. He just has a knack to make that big play when you need him to, whether it's in a 3v3 or he's in a 1v2 or a 1v1. He just seems to be able to output so much damage that you have a guy like Zap and another guy like Reps who can come in and clean it up. I think this is the team that really has found their cohesion in this meta, and I think that they are definitely a team to look out for in terms of as a contender.
Jay, where are you standing with TSM and what they got going on currently?
I agree with everything Donnie said. The thing that I find very interesting about TSM currently is, and this is maybe a little bit of a spoiler alert on a future video that I have coming out very soon, but I recently interviewed Sea Lion. And if you know anything about Sea Lion, he is kind of the when we talk about traditional sports, there's like the coaching tree, right? All the coaches that stem from that guy, Raven, ZZ, Talmadge, all these kind of guys, Luke for Gaming Gladiators, all stem from the Sea Lion coaching tree. And talking with him, he was very much talking about some of the importance of innovation, pushing boundaries, finding gaps that other teams are not finding when it comes to character interactions, play styles, all this kind of stuff, right? And TSM has been cooking with the Rampart on all 3 maps. I can't say they were the first team to cook with Rampart because Team Liquid won BLGS for the Rampart, but TSM has been doing with all 3 maps. And I think there's something interesting there. Even though I'm a renowned Rampart hater, I think there's something interesting there because of the current meta with the Newcastle walls, the Gibby bubbles, all this kind of stuff. Obviously, you can't blow through a Gibby bubble, but the Newcastle wall and the Newcastle Q, having that Sheila to just burn through it and make sure that some of these teams can't reset in positions that so many teams are right now, I think there's something interesting there. And I really do think that if they can really lock in on that specific play style that they're currently trying out and it works, TSM, I mean, they could, I don't know, they could win the whole thing. I hate to keep saying that about so many teams, but I will say for this group specifically, I do think this is kind of the group of death because I think like half of these teams really have a shot to actually win everything.
And I mean, we've talked about it, just me and you, a few times on the show, but TSM continuing their reign of just being a very good, solid team post Imperial Howl is one of the coolest things to watch because these guys have continued to just keep putting on performance after performance. And we're still talking about them as a group of death team member because they are a team that when you see them in your group, you're like, oh, fuck, that team is here. Just talk about those guys and how TSM has been impressive in the post Howl era.
I mean, I'm not going to lie. When they decided to go with Zap as their third, I wasn't obviously Zap is an incredibly talented player. I just didn't know if it was the right choice for them because, IGL leaving and Zap hadn't been in IGL, but the amount of growth and the amount of time spent as a team has really gone a long way in terms of them coming together and figuring out how they're going to play. And so I do think that this is going to be the best tournament that we've seen from them to date, no question. I know that they didn't have they had a rough EWC. And so they got their bad turning out of the way. That slingshot is prepped. And this is a team that I think you should fully expect to be in if not like top 5, guaranteed top 10. And I think that if you're a TSM fan out there, you have every right to be disappointed if they don't.
Now, Donnie, here comes the moment of truth once again. TSM wins this LAN. What went right? TSM doesn't do well. What was the thing that held them back?
I would say TSM wins this LAN if they commit to their style of play. I think they're one of the few teams that have really done an exceptional job of being able to stagger the Gibby bubble with the Newcastle mobile shield. And I think if they continue to use that to effectively rotate, they will win the LAN. And I think the reason why they won't win this LAN is if they get too overly aggressive and fight themselves out of a game-winning spot.
Jay, where are you at?
I agree with the stuff Donnie said, but I'll build upon it. If TSM wins the LAN, like I said, I think it's partially because that they commit to that style and the stuff they've been cooking, but also I think just plain and simple, the championship DNA, it kicks in, right? We talk about that with traditional sports, with Faker, with some of these different, guys. If you're a winner, you're a winner. And Reps and Verhulst, they know how to win. Obviously, Zap and Talmadge haven't been there yet, but if those two guys, if they can just kick in those high pressure moments, and Zap and Talmadge can obviously elevate to the level that those two guys are setting, then this team can absolutely win it all. And if they don't, then I think simply put, maybe the stuff they've been cooking just didn't work as effectively as they were thinking it would. And I mean, I hate to use somewhat of a lame answer, but maybe just some other team just had a better day.
Yeah, and that happens. That definitely happens in a BR. I'm going to throw a different question your way. I'm just going to say, if they do win the LAN, who has to be their MVP? Who is the one who has to be at the absolute tippy top of their performance? Because a lot of people I think would say Verhulst, but I think Zap probably is that guy I'm looking at where he kind of has to be the difference maker, I think, if they want to win this thing.
Yeah, I agree. I think when you look at what you're gonna get from Evan and Reps in this environment and in this situation, you already know what you're gonna get. But Zap doesn't have quite as much experience in these large tournament settings, and so I do think it'll come down to how well he can acclimate to the environment and then really just show how good of a player he is.
Beautiful. Perfect. Now, moving on into another NA team. We've got Moist Esports, MT, Zainu, and Koifel. Talking about these guys here. Obviously, Zainu and Koifel, they've had success with one another. They move on from Phony. They bring in MT. Don, I'll throw it on down to you. Where are you seeing Moist right now? Do you see them in that potential form to be able to repeat in a way?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you really had to pick one or two teams that may be just a tiny step above the other 3 or 4 potential winners, LAN potential winners, I think Moist along with Alliance are probably those two teams right now. I think that Moist, with the chemistry that they've been able to develop between Empty and Zainu when it comes to their macro and their micro decisions, I think that it is something to watch because obviously they don't nearly stream as much as everybody would like to, but the few times we have seen them stream scrims, the communication between Zainu and Empty is actually just insane to listen to. They do such a good job of building off one another. Of, sometimes Empty will have a little bit less of aggressive a decision that Zainu will play off of. Sometimes Zainu will want to play a little bit more aggressively, and then Empty will build off of that. So it's a really interesting dynamic to where then that just allows Koifel to be who Koifel is, and that is just a demon in the lobby, because I think we all know how good he is. I don't think we even need to really go into that too much, but having Zainu and Koifel come off of winning Split 2 LAN, obviously being defending champions, that brings its own pedigree, but also its own pressure. You've won that LAN, you are the big dog. How do you repeat that performance? We've obviously seen that repeating in Apex is a very tough thing to do. I think it's only been done once. I think Dark Zero had won back-to-back LANs one time. But other than that, it's a very tough thing to do in a BR. So we'll see how they come out and how they play. But I think their play style there are just going to be days that they can just run down anybody that they want to, and that's definitely a nice little tool to have in the whole toolbox. So we'll see what they end up doing. See if they can kind of make those final decisions to make those game winning decisions versus getting overly aggressive. But I think you'd be dumb not to consider them one of like the one or two teams that are probably maybe just a little bit above everybody else right now.
Now, Jay, this was obviously a team that went through an IGL change. They move on from Phony. They bring in MT. And for them, what was the reasoning? I mean, we can't go into the personal reasoning behind, but what was the reasoning like why this is a good move for them moving forward without Phony and bringing in MT, at least from what you think their perspective would be?
I mean, ultimately, everything that they've stated publicly seems like there was some clashing in terms of personalities, in terms of the relationship between Phony and the other two, and it just seems like they didn't really like each other anymore as teammates. I'm sure they're totally fine as like actual friends and all that kind of stuff, and there's not like real beef. But in terms of like the teammate working relationship, it just seemed like it didn't work, and I think that it's. In that vein, it's a good move because with MT, I think he's a very flexible person. He's worked with a lot of different kinds of teams. I mean, we talk about obviously those moist days with Waltzy. Waltzy's a very fiery personality. He's going to speak his mind, doesn't care how you feel about it. So he's worked with that kind of player all the way to like someone like Guild, who's kind of the opposite. Guild doesn't feel like he's someone that's going to go after everybody, very flexible, just going to kind of fit in and do his thing. And so he's worked with a lot of different kinds of people. And so I think that he can handle pretty much anybody. I think he's one of the more mature players in the scene. He obviously left Moist, went back to APAC South, joins these two up-and-coming young players in Legacy and Jesco from Guild, and then they do fantastic. They get a 9th at EWC and a 5th in Split 2 playoffs. Both times they hit match point. So clearly, it doesn't matter what teammates he has, he can perform. I mean, over his last 6 LAN appearances, I think 5 of them are top 10s, and the other one was a 12th. So the guy, in terms of consistency of results, and I would say out of every IGL that hasn't yet won, he's probably at the top of that list of, top of the line IGLs you could possibly get. So he's been fantastic. And then obviously you've got Koifel and Zainu, who are arguably the best roller duo in the entire world. Like they're right there with like Effect and Unlucky. So this team, I mean, they have it all on paper. They have it all. And not to glaze too hard, but I'm going to make a statement right here. And I don't know if a lot of people agree with this, but as things currently stand, as of today, I believe that Zainu is the individual best player in Apex Legends right now. When I watched the SSG VODs, I was fully expecting to see a completely different sort of style of play. But when Donnie talks about those comms, Zainu's micro calls are insane. Like, I think he has some of the best micro calls in the entire world right now, and he's not even the IGL. Like, the things that he says to do, he was consistently making the right plays over and over and over again. He's one of the most flexible players in the world. We've seen him top frag in North American Pro League playing Bangalore. We've seen him win a LAN playing Seer as a frontliner with Zero and the DZ days. All of a sudden, to this LAN where they win with SSG, he's playing Watson on World's Edge and then Fuse on Stormpoint, playing as the anchor player. Like, we've seen him do everything and win all the different kinds of ways. He's the only player to have won with 2 completely different teams. I think that Zainu right now is the best player in the world. And like Donnie said, when those comms are going crazy between him and MT, because MT, I think, is one of the best macro IGLs, you've got the best micro calls, the best macro calls. And then at the top of that is just Koifel just killing everything in front of him. Like, you want to talk about arguably the most talented controller player in terms of just raw talent. Like, he's there. So on paper, this is truly, like Donnie said, it's them in Alliance. I think those are the top favorites right now, and then everybody else after them.
Okay, so I'm just going to bleed this into the question we've been ending every single team segment with. You've obviously just told me the reasons why they are going to win, why they win a LAN, and what the reason would be. If they don't do well, what was the thing holding them back?
I think it would be a slow start. We saw that with SSG at Split 2 playoffs. They didn't have the quickest of starts. There was a couple little moments that were, not great. First off, they just hit a random blind evac in game one. They died immediately off drop. They were the 20th, or not off drop. They were the 20th place team, though, in that game. Blind evacing, not a great decision there. And all the players were on board for it, so it's not like we can blame any individual one. Then in game two, they have a complete miscommunication where they're going for a very specific spot. It seems like Zainu and Koifel were going to an incorrect building, and Phony was going to this one truck over by Climatizer. Just a slight miscommunication there. And it just took them a little bit to kind of get into that rhythm. And we've seen somewhat of a similar thing with some of MT's teams in the past as well. We've never seen any of these guys outside of when Zainu was on Dark Zero have that like rocket start where in the first 3 or 4 games, they're right there on match point, ready to win. And so I think the only thing that would potentially hold them back is a little bit of a slower start in the finals, where they just have maybe too many games where other teams are on match point and they're not, and somebody else is able to have too many chances to win. And then finally, when they do hit match point, they have like 1 or 2 actual opportunities and they're not able to capitalize on them.
Donnie, what would your thoughts be? What makes them win? What holds them back from hoisting the trophy?
Yeah, I mean, I think what makes them win is just honestly playing moist game. I think that they don't really need to do anything in particular different than what they've already been doing these past few months. I mean, we've seen them at times where they just will steamroll a lobby and win 2, 3, 4 games in a row and put up an insane amount of points. I think the only thing that potentially could hold them back is if they're overcooking too much. I think that the big thing that we see with Zainu is that his micro decisions are very good. Again, I would argue, like Jay would, as potentially the best in the world. But their problem will be is that in this meta, with how easy it is to res and reset, are they able to finish fights quick enough to then move on to the next position to where they need to rotate or potentially hold off a third party? It's just those little moments if they can be on top of their game and they can move on to that next thing instead of overcooking and kind of getting stuck into a fight for too long, or they don't wipe something quick enough. That'll be what ultimately is their downfall. Because I think, again, unless they have an absolute terrible day, they will hit match point. It's just, can they play in that match point style of closing out the game instead of going for those extra KP?
Now, Eve, once again, I'm going to throw it down a different question for you. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Jay.
Just to add on to what Donnie said, as much as I just glazed them and gave them all, the compliments and everything, when you have that level of talent, I do think there is somewhat of an element of you have so much confidence that maybe it's a little too bad. Like you think you can win every fight that maybe you can't necessarily win. And I think that's somewhat contributed to, maybe some of the poor starts that we've seen from these teams in the past. So I think that falls... Obviously, like I just said, Zainu's got some of the best micro calls in the game, but I do think that falls on your IGL ultimately to be that ultimate decision maker of like when Donnie's talking about them overcooking, MT's got to be the guy to step in and make sure that doesn't happen and kind of ensures that they're always playing for wins as opposed to, just getting a little too greedy sometimes when there's a lot of points left in the game, but they think we can wipe this and then, you get thirded and fourth and you die. So.
Yeah, and then throwing it on down to E. For this team's MVP, we know what Zainu can do. We know what Koifel can do. And MT obviously has done really well in the IGL spot. But who do you think needs to be at their best for them to be able to perform and ultimately win a LAN?
I'm going to go ahead and go with Zainu on that one. Because like if we're talking like micro calls and like deciding like whether or not like this is the fight that we're going to jump in on or like this is what we're going to take, the way that like Apex is a game where there as much scrims as there have been, and let me tell you, there have been a lot of scrims leading up into this, but those scrims compared to how the games actually play out in tournament on like tourney day is like completely different. And so it'll really just come down to like whether or not obviously it's going to come down to MT as well as like the primary IGL, but I do think it'll really just depend on how well they're able to adapt and to adjust to how it's going to be come game day, because it's just not the same as scrims. Because there's no matter what you do, there is no way to get people to pretend like they're playing for millions of dollars when they're not.
Yeah.
And so I think that'll be the biggest thing for them moving forward.
Does anybody know MT's height? Because if they do win a trophy, I worry about Koifel and Zainu lifting it a little bit too high for him. So do we have a do we know how tall he is?
He's taller than Koifo, I'm pretty sure. I know that for sure. I don't know if
Okay,
he's
so
taller
we're
than
good.
Zainu.
So
but I'm
all
pretty sure he's
three
taller than
people will
Koifo.
be able to get their hands on the trophy because that was a tough look for Phony last time. That
Yeah,
might be
that
why,
was-
that might cause the split.
Listen.
That one picture,
Yeah,
that one moment.
Ultimately, we need some sort of training for these teams. They got to figure out proper formations for holding the trophy. 'Cause
Exactly.
Phony being on the end, and then on the opposite end, Zainu, the tallest player, being the one who grabs it with two hands. It's just not, nothing's going to go well there because he's too tall. Imagine. I know we're not talking about him today, but if Furia win that trophy, we're getting into some risky territory, okay?
Yeah, boy,
because
Catching some
if
strays,
Keon
Poor Madness.
if Keon lifts the trophy as the primary holder, things
And
could get
Weedle
scary for
Madness.
Madness. That's all I'm saying.
Weedle Madness.
We need to allow the shortest person to be the one who gets both hands on, and the other two guys go one hand on the side. Okay,
I agree.
We need to get that out of the way first off. All right,
I agree.
And I say that too because if you look at every time TSM has won, I believe Mr. Verhulst, the tallest player on that team, was always on the edge. Oh, they're always excluding Verhulst. No, that's proper trophy lifting formation right there. Okay, you got to have the tall guys on the outside. Reps was always in the middle. Always.
If anything, that makes him more of a champion in my eyes as a short king myself. That to me is like, hey, I'm not going to embarrass you right now on this podium.
Sure.
So you take it. You take it. Yeah, perfect. Just as long as we got that out of the way, we just had to throw that out there. Boys, 5 teams up. We've got 5 teams to go, and some of these might go a little bit quicker here just because they're outside of our region. But let's start off with Exo Clan from EMEA. We got K Swinney, Slayers, and Feuda. Donnie, Exo Clan. This was a team that I really enjoyed watching, and it's been kind of like a little bit of back and forth with this team. You get a little bit of good, you get a little bit of bad. Where are you standing with Exo Clan right now?
I think Exo Clan will definitely be interesting because I think they're definitely a team that is very hot and cold. I think that when they are playing at their best, they can produce some very quality performances. I mean, we've seen them this year, got 10th at the EWC. So they have the potential of being able to be in or around, that top 10 in the world, which again, I think for most teams is definitely an accomplishment and what most teams are aiming for. But even here recently, we've seen in regional finals of BLGS, they got 14th in EMEA, which no shot to their region, but definitely doesn't really compare to necessarily other regions around the world, just in terms of depth. So to see a team that typically is finished, is typically getting to lands and players that we know, seeing a 14th can be a little worrying. So we'll definitely have to see how they're feeling coming into champs, because I know just during scrims, again, it definitely does play out differently, like you mentioned earlier. But again, I really haven't seen them forming the best of kind of those habits that you kind of look for in teams that will succeed. So we'll definitely see how they play. Again, I think that ultimately this is a team that will have to play very well to make the finals lobby. So we'll see how they end up doing. But again, I think with all the players on the roster, there's definitely plenty of experience. So that might hold out on a land. So we'll have to see how they do.
Jay, your thoughts on Exo Clan?
I think Exo Clan are a very solid team. I think they could definitely pop off in groups and even the bracket stage. But ultimately in the finals lobbies, they seem to consistently kind of hover in that like 10 to 20 range. I mean, just looking at K Swinney's historical placements, 15th in Germany, 10th at EWC, 13th at last year's championship. He had 24th before that, but then a 9th at the Splitland playoffs. So 4 out of his last 5 LAN appearances have been in the 9 to 15 range, and I think that's a pretty solid spot for him. I'm not saying they're a guaranteed finals team, because I do think he's made 3 lands in which they didn't make the finals previously. So there's certainly a potential that they might not make the finals, but I do think they can absolutely make some noise. I just don't really view them as of right now as a legit contender to close it out on match point.
Yeah, that's kind of the vibe I'm getting as well. Kind of like that middle of the pack. They can surprise you, but they probably won't go all the way type of team. Maybe like that feel-good story somewhere in the finals where you're like, oh, cool, this team, like they put on a really great performance. They got up to 7th. Nobody was really saying their name as they got there, but that's kind of where I'm at as well. Now, it's kind of difficult to figure out where things will go wrong and or right for teams somewhere in that middle of the pack. But Don, if they were to win a LAN, what is the reason? And if they don't do well, what held them back?
I think for them, I would say to perform well at this LAN, I think it will take just all three of them having to play at their absolute best. They don't necessarily have the biggest firepower just in terms of just raw shooting their gun like we see with a Koifel or Verholst or some of these other teams. So I think for them to have success or even potentially, if we're talking about winning a LAN, I think it'll just kind of be one of those messy finals lobbies where we get a ton of teams on a match point and they kind of surprisingly just end up in the right spot at the right time. And I think things may not go well for them if they end up running into the wrong team at the wrong time, because again, this is one of those teams that if they're caught out mid-rotate, will definitely struggle in their 3v3s. And I think that they have to be on top of their game because this is a team that definitely has very error-prone moments at times. So they really have to eliminate those during their rotates and during their positioning in order to have success at this champs.
Jay, you kind of agree?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, I don't really know what the thing would be for them to for things to go wrong. Because, like I've said, we've seen 3 LANs where they haven't even made finals, so it's not like they're a top of the line contender where it'd be shocking if they weren't to make finals. But for them to win, they just simply put out to show us something we've never seen before. I don't know what that exact thing is, whether that's just incredible IGLing out of Swinney himself, getting them in just consistent game-winning spots, whether that's like Donnie said, they don't really have consistent firepower, but maybe at this LAN things change and they absolutely start fragging out of their minds. Maybe it's a character comp thing because we have seen them in the past experiment with some pretty crazy comps. I remember which funny enough was their best placement ever when they got 9th in London the first time. They were running Lifeline, Revenant. They were just switching up the comp just for fun. I remember on the B stream, they were reading chat at certain points and being yeah, next set we'll play that comp because chat suggested it. So I think there's potential they could, maybe find something unique that people just haven't discovered. But like I said, in order for them to win, they've got to show something that we just haven't quite seen out of them.
Yeah, and moving on into another EMEA team, we go on to Ninjas in Pajamas with Nasky, Zane, and Amphi. Now, this team has some names. It's got some firepower. I'll throw it on down to you again first, Don. Where do you stand with NIP?
So right now, they are in quite an interesting spot. I think that they have definitely struggled through a lot of the portion of the year. I think that they've been stuck between wanting to be a fighting team and wanting to be a zone team. Whereas I think we've seen a lot of the success that Nasty teams have had has been a little bit more zone oriented. So I figured this would probably be the meta where they got a little bit back to that, but we haven't quite seen it on a consistent basis. There's just a lot of very tough decisions that they're making that lead to a lot of early deaths and just not really being able to stack up points. So it's just, if we were basing this off a pure recent performance, I think that this would be a team that you could argue would even struggle to make it to a finals lobby. But I think the ultimate X factor is that you have 2 players with Nasky and Zane that have shown on a LAN format to play extremely well and play higher than we've seen them play before. Because I'm pretty sure before one of the LANs that they got a top 10, they were finishing last in scrims consistently. Everybody was saying how big of a joke Nasky was. And then they just came out of nowhere and just absolutely showed everybody that they are a serious contender. I think their ultimate X factor is going to be how Amphi plays, because as the anchor, and I believe he is playing the Newcastle right now, that really is the character that is going to be the main focus for most of these teams. And can he elevate his game to match what Nasky and Zane have produced on previous LANs, to ultimately get this team to at least the finals lobby where I think they expect to be.
Jay, anything else to add on to that?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything Don said. I definitely think on paper, this team has the talent to have a top performance. Like he said, Nasky's had really good placements for. He had 5th at year 2's champs. Then he picks up Zane in year 3. They get 6th in the second London LAN and then 8th in Birmingham. So we've seen them place well. We've seen them have top performances And we've seen them hit match point in some of those lands, in some of those instances. They were never quite a team that was in a position to truly win it. Even in some of those, I believe like they hit match point in the last game, so they never actually had a true chance to close it out. But we've seen them get into those spots. It's just right now, I feel like they're just in such a mental rut. I feel like their confidence is probably at an all-time low. They got 29th at EWC. They got 28th in Germany. So they just haven't been looking good. Like when they're getting to those losers bracket lobbies, like in Germany, they're in losers round 2, but then they place inside of the bottom 10. Like they're one of the bottom teams in that entire bracket. It's just disheartening to see if you're that team. And I somewhat feel like it's almost they're just in a really weird position right now, because I don't know how much they individually believe this team can perform considering those two performances. I don't know how confident they feel in themselves to go out there and actually pop off, because when you look at a 29th and a 28th, but you have a champ spot, and do you just stick together because you have the champ spot and it's kind of one last hurrah, or do you actually have confidence that you can go out there and turn this thing around and perform and then stick together going into the next year? I don't know. That only they really know the answer to that question. It's also tough that they lost their coach Don. Like he was their coach. He goes over to SSG for Germany because, which actually even Nasky, his team wasn't at Germany. That 28th that he got he was subbing. So actually they weren't even there. That's even worse, because he didn't even play in that bracket stage. I forgot about that. He was subbing for Legends during the group stage. So it's even worse. Like they didn't even qualify for Germany. So I don't know. They're just in a really weird spot where I don't know where their individual confidence lies. There's been some shakeups behind the scenes. So I really wouldn't be surprised if we were to see a pretty bad result out of this team. But I do think that if they can come together, if they can rebuild that confidence and, really work on their game, then we could see them get back to those heights we've seen in the past. But I do agree with Don. I think they have to embrace being a zone team, because every time we've ever seen Nasky play zone, when they play Edge, I think back to when even Panders subbed for them in the Split 1 playoffs of year 3. They tried playing Edge. They didn't make finals. Like he's just not his own IGL. It's just not his thing. He's best when he can call zone, get in good spots, and try to win from there.
So that would be the key to success then. If they were to win the LAN, it would be playing zone.
Yeah, be playing zone, but also they just have to start quicker. Like I said, a lot of those lands where he has had good performances, they haven't actually, they've hit match point, but never had a game to try to close it out. You've got to try and have at least a couple games where you have a chance, because with zone RNG and just some of the things that, might not go your way, it's unlikely you're going to hit match point and then win the next game. You need a couple chances to get it. And so they just have to pick up the pace in which they're gaining points. Usually they're gaining those points in like games 5, 6, 7, 8 range. They need to start gaining points in those early games.
Donnie, would you add anything to if they win a LAN, this would be the reason why, or do you feel like that's like a pretty good estimation?
Yeah, I think from a gameplay standpoint, that's definitely good. I just think from more of the mental standpoint, it's just bringing that personality and flair that we've seen those teams play with. Again, we know them from the contests and how all that worked. And most of those times when they're in those contests part of ALGS, obviously they were getting a little bit more points from KP, but you could just tell with how much confidence that they were playing back then. And I mean, we've seen the highlight of Zane multiple times where he's a solo and he guns down 5 people in a row and just goes crazy. And I believe I think almost a finals lobby or an eliminations bracket at that point. So I think them just confidently getting back to, you know what, we're going to play this way. If it works, it works. It doesn't, it doesn't. But we're going to play confident and know that when we leave this land, we played at our absolute best and gave it everything.
Perfect. So now moving on into our final 3 teams here, we've got Shadow, the team from China, Invite. We got Jackie 1. I think you say it's Zuzu, right? Zuzu's got to be the name.
That's where I'd go with it. Yeah.
Yeah. And then there's also Zuz with a capital S at the very end. So you got Zuzu and you got Zuz. And so that is the Chinese Invite team. Anything on Shadow that you guys got?
I may be butchering this, but I played Dynasty Warriors back in the day, video game. If anyone's ever played that, they pronounce that Zhao. So could be Zhao Zhao. Don't know. This is entirely based off of one video game I played in my youth that was based on Chinese history. So
that sounds better than what I said. So
we're
I'm
doing
gonna
our
go with
best.
that.
We apologize.
I'm gonna do that. We're gonna go with that
because these guys are from China.
Yeah. So now this is a team that I'm sure a lot of people listening to this show have not heard a whole lot about, or if they have seen, They don't really know what the team's about. From your guys' perspective, if you have anything, what exactly do you see from Shadow? I'll throw it on down to Dawn.
Yeah, so just in terms of what most people think of as LAN appearances or how they've done at the big tournaments, each player's only had the one LAN appearance. They were together as a team at Germany, and they actually surprised quite a few people. They were playing a very interesting comp of Path, Revenant, Crypto, which obviously the Crypto was kind of still within the meta, but the Path and the Revenant were definitely an interesting combination to have. They're a very aggressive play style that I think honestly caught a lot of people off guard at that LAN, because how the China invites work is that teams that don't qualify out of the APAC South region, the top couple China teams from then that pool end up being invited, and then obviously that depends on points and everything like that they accumulate through lands too.
Real quick, just to clarify, there's this random tournament I think called like the Dream Cup.
That sounds right,
and it's like the top 2 Chinese teams in the Dream Cup standings that are not already qualified through Pro League make it. So it's like, I think even one of the Chinese teams, I can't remember if it was LA or Germany, but one of them didn't actually even place that high in the Dream Cup. They just happened to be like one of the highest teams that wasn't already going. So, because like Dreamfire, for example, Chinese team, but they play in APAC South Pro League. So, anyway, just,
It's a lot better way to word that than anything I was saying. So I'm glad he said something.
It's a very weird system. So it's tough to like gain
weird.
Familiarity with some of these teams, because you don't really know where to watch them outside of the Stream Cup. And even that, I don't know where to watch that. So,
right. But ultimately for this team, like I said, they usually play very aggressively. I think we'll see the same thing here at Champs. Their most recent performances, they got 22nd at Germany, which again, for a team that isn't necessarily widely known, that's a very respectful placement to get. And then recently in BLGS for APAC South, they got 11th in the regional final. So they're a team that probably won't really contend, more likely than not. But again, there will definitely be a interesting factor to have to account for, because they're probably going to be looking to play edge. Again, we've talked about so many zone teams needing to rotate quickly. If you run into a team like Shadow, they will fight you no matter where you're at, no matter what point in the game it is. So they're a team you'll definitely want to just kind of keep an eye on every so often, just to see, what comp they're running, or, if they're aggressively running down teams. But again, in terms of the overall picture, probably not a team that'll factor in too much. But again, 22nd, right on that cusp, potentially making a final in Germany. So you never know. They might be on top of their game and find their way into a final this time around. So we'll see.
Now, I'm not gonna go through the gamut of if they win, if they lose, but I will say there's always a team every LAN that I watch where I see their name always in the kill feed, whether it's them getting killed or them getting kills, and I'm like, oh, that team must be doing great. And then I look and I'm just way off base. I think this will be that team for me. I think I'm going to see their name and be like, this team must be doing awesome. And then I'm going to look, and it's not going to be like terrible, but it'll probably just be like very middle of the pack. That happens to me every single time. So I think that'll be that. It just seems like a team that's going to be for me. It happens every single LAN, every single one. That's what I have. It's a given every single time. So that's where I'm sitting at with Shadow.
I will say that the Chinese region, if anyone is unfamiliar with the Chinese region, very aggressive teams. So you're talking about like you're going to see them on the kill feed. That's what Chinese teams do. Like the Chinese teams, every time they get to LAN, incredibly aggressive, very mechanical players. So the highlight reels that can come out of those moments are awesome. They can absolutely dominate in group stages, because in the groups, it's not like the highest level of gameplay where you have all the best teams at the LAN in one lobby. You have some of the bottom feeders kind of in each group around there. And things can be a lot more friendly to very aggressive teams. Like Alliance got that, group stage moniker because a very aggressive team have always dominated in groups and weren't able to put it together in finals lobbies. Obviously, they've switched that around now. So I'm not saying they're going to win anything, but in terms of if they want to make the finals, and they almost did. In Germany, they got 22nd. They were 2 spots away from making it to the finals. They made it to the winner's bracket, which is incredibly impressive in its own right. They got 14th in groups. So if they can take that aggression and in the bracket stage, control it a little bit more when you get a favorable zone or you have a really good position, and maybe unfortunately kind of have to go against what their natural play style is, which is to just be incredibly aggro and take every fight, but be just a little bit smarter about it. We could see them make a finals lobby. Like, they really weren't that far off. And for the fact that that was, I believe, all 3 of their first LAN as a team, and just as individual players, a 22nd is a really strong performance. So you got to give your hats to that team and what they were able to do. And I don't think that it would be incredibly shocking if we were to see them make a finals lobby. Like I said, I don't think if they got there that they would be placing top 10 or anything, but I do think there's a realistic chance that they could take what they learned from the last one, improve upon it, and then actually, we see some growth.
Yeah. And I'll say real quick too, one thing that was really interesting with their POI draft especially is that they actually drafted a lot of more central kind of POIs. They end up going with like a staging and a monument and these different POIs that kind of lean towards more of a rotate play style. So let's see if they're trying to maybe change things up a little bit to, like you said, Jay, maybe perform a little bit better in the elimination part of the tournament. Because again, I think we've seen that they can definitely accumulate points, which again, that's obviously the big part of the first 2 days. But then what is your adjustment for the later part of the tournament if you do end up making it towards that, the losers bracket or the winners bracket? How does your play style kind of adjust accordingly? So it'll be interested to see, especially from those POIs. Those don't necessarily bring an edge play style. So we'll see how that goes.
Good looks, Donnie. Good looks. That was perfect right there. Now moving on into, we got our final 2 teams here. FaZe Clan from EMEA. Donnie, I'll throw it on down to you. FaZe Clan, what you're seeing from them right now.
So this is a team that definitely is struggling. I'll just kind of put it pretty point blank. I think that with the names you would see within this team, Sonetic, Nags, JMW, again, got a lot of guys that have built up experience through Pro League or previous LANs. I mean, JMW, for those who don't remember, was the player that filled in for Dark Zero when Jen Burton couldn't play, and he actually won the LAN with them when they were Reignite, I believe, was who they were playing under at the time. So they have experience when it comes to playing on a LAN and having some sort of success. But for whatever reason, as of late, I don't know if it might just be more of a meta thing. The crypto meta didn't really seem to work for them because I believe they went out in losers round 1. I think it was like 35th or so. And
37th.
And then here recently, they played a little better, but kind of stumbled their way into a 6th place in EMEA for the BLGS finals, which I think the old FaZe team, I mean, I believe if I remember correctly, going into Germany, they had like one Pro League or won a tournament going into it. So they had form at one point, and then since that split 2 playoff, just really haven't been the same team that we've seen. So they'll definitely be an interesting team to watch because, again, I think the potential is there for them to be a very solid team, but it's just, can they find that thing that helps them stand out in this meta? Because I think right now they're kind of just following the meta and it's not really working. And I really feel like you need to be a team. If it's not truly working, find what does. Like, so many teams kind of just continue to follow the trend of, well, everybody else is playing this, so I have to. I think they might be a team that could benefit from trying to play something a little bit differently. But the question is that obviously we're about 2 weeks or so away from champs. Is it a little too late to kind of figure out anything else? So we'll have to see how they play. Again, hopefully they do well. Hopefully they can find some form. But again, if we're kind of talking right now, not really a team. I mean, I could easily see them going out and lose this round 1 again based on their current form.
Now, Jay, for this team to potentially come away with a victory here, what would have to go right?
Like Don said, we've seen them do really good in regional play. They got 2nd in Split 2's Pro League, and they won the regional finals, like he was talking about. So we've seen them do good in the region. I think that they have to do what we've seen a lot of other teams coming out of EMEA do, which is learn how to play on LAN with the different style. EMEA teams, I feel like specifically, have to go through that growth process a lot. I mean, we saw it with Alliance. They got the whole group stage team moniker, and now they're like, they've gotten 1st and 3rd their last 2 LANs. They're, arguably the best team in the entire game right now. But for a while there, it felt like they had to learn how to play in those sort of high pressure lobbies on LAN. We think back to like Aurora, back when they used to be named Fire Beavers, right? Everybody said their style of play wouldn't work. And for the first few lands, they were making finals, but they weren't ever doing anything in there, like a bottom 5 team. And then all of a sudden, the last few lands, they've started to pull it together. They've started to make it work. They're hitting match point. Now they're like kind of a threat, right? So I think they just have to kind of go through that process. They got 13th at EWC, but that format was a lot less. It didn't require as much consistency. Because you had the one set of 10 games, and if you placed, in the top 9 of that set, you're going to the finals, and then it's just a matter of playing in the finals. And that finals went so long that like 13th doesn't feel. It's just okay, but it doesn't feel anything crazy because with how inflated the points got, every team had a chance to get points and try and get somewhere higher up on the leaderboard, right? But then, like Don said, they get the 37th in Germany. They drop Arctic after that, bring in JMW. I don't know. I don't know what it would take for them to really improve outside of, like I said, going through that simple growth process of actually figuring out this is how LAN lobbies are played. This is how bracket stage lobbies are played. This is how finals lobbies are played. Because I don't think they've quite figured that out. And I don't think they really have a ton of experience, unfortunately, in those lobbies yet. With EWC being their highest placement, once again, that's their only match point finals lobby they've played in on LAN. They got the 37th. They got the 25th in LA. So they've got to figure out how to make it through those bracket stages in some of those high pressure situations when things are actually on the line. And all of a sudden, all the plays that were happening in scrims that all the pros love to complain about because nobody's going to do that on LAN. When that actually happens and nobody's doing that on LAN and people are playing for their life, playing for a win, how do you navigate this lobby and try to get as many points as you possibly can? I don't think they've quite cracked that code yet. But maybe JMW can bring some experience and help them figure that out.
Okay. And that leads us into our final team. We're back in NA, Team Oblivion with Blinkser, Reeds, and Nano. And now, if I'm not mistaken here, this is the first LAN appearance for Blinkser and Nano. Reeds has obviously been there before. But I'm going to throw it on down to you to start with, Jay. Oblivion. Let's just kick it off with immediately what has to go right for Oblivion, because there's a lot of great teams coming out of NA, and this is probably not a team that you look at immediately off of the short list of teams that you're like, this is what you're looking for. These are some tops here, candidates here. But for Oblivion, what can they do to try and win a LAN?
Well, I'll be honest. I don't think they can really do anything to win a LAN. Like,
so it'd have to be like situational, like you said. Maybe you have like a few good performances, muck it up. Game 13, something like that.
If they were to win a LAN, it would genuinely be like one of the craziest stories ever. Like, this is, when people talk about, like, remember Furia's run at that champs, like, this is an LCQ team. We really have no high expectations for them whatsoever. They'd have to have a Furia, like, legendary type of performance in order to do that. I don't expect to see that happening. So yeah, and I don't want to rain on anybody's parade, but just realistically, I don't. But in order for them to have success, I do think they could potentially make a finals lobby. Like, we've seen other LCQ teams do that before, so it's not out of the realm of possibility. And here's the thing. Although they are an LCQ team, they come from North America. This is the best region in the world, the deepest region in the world. And luckily for them, like Donnie mentioned at the very top of this podcast, they're in the very NA-heavy group. And in some of these other groups, I believe it's like Group D or maybe Group C, there's like another like 4 or 5 NA teams in that one. Half the lobby is North American. They need to capitalize on those groups when they know how all those teams play and they understand the intricacies of those teams' games, and they can capitalize on that knowledge because unfortunately, outside of Reeds, like you said, they don't have LAN experience. They haven't competed against a lot of these teams. They're not really going to understand how some of these teams are going to be playing in those stages. So they have to capitalize on the NA-heavy lobbies that they're going to get, and they have to perform in those, because if they don't perform in those, there's a knowledge gap, and they can still perform in the other lobbies because, like I said, North American LCQ teams are usually a little of higher quality than we would consider a typical LCQ team. So I'm not counting them out by any means, but they absolutely have to perform when they do have the knowledge of how teams are going to be playing around them.
And Donnie, doesn't start off well for them because they are a lower seed when it came to the POI draft. So they're already kind of behind the 8 ball here. Also, all the things Jay mentioned, but is there anything else that you can look at as a positive for what Oblivion wants to do in Japan?
Yeah, I mean, they have Reeds, who has had some past success. I believe that was with the Oxygen roster when that team came up and kind of surprised a lot of people, where they had a couple lands back to back where they performed really well. including a third place at Split 2 playoffs in year 3. So there is a little bit of experience there in terms of, finding success in a LAN. Obviously a very different roster than what he was playing on previously. But I mean, I think Jay hit it on the head. I think that having that experience in the top region in the world can only help you, because again, you kind of know like where the top teams like to play from or how they play. And so I think having that experience versus some of these other teams that won't have that experience necessarily playing against the best of the best all of the time outside of one or two teams, I think that will definitely bode well for them. And I think their just biggest thing is they just have to maximize where they can. Like Jay said, I believe it's the A versus D matchup where that's actually the last match of the group stages. So they can hopefully build enough points to where when they get to a little bit more of a familiar lobby, where 11 of the 20 teams will be NA, which again is really crazy to think about. But when they get into a lobby like that, taking advantage of the knowledge that they'll have, and again, hopefully kind of maximizing on what they were able to get from the first 2 days to then be a little bit more comfortable going into that last day. Their just biggest thing is just they have to avoid like the 0 point games. Like they just have to find a way to chip, a couple points here, a couple points there. You're getting 35-ish points, maybe finishing around that 8th to 12th in each match day. So then you build up, I believe it's usually the cutoffs anywhere between about 95 and 105, like somewhere in there usually is the cutoff to get you to the winner's bracket. So they kind of just have to have that number on their mind and say, what is it going to take to get to this point? I think that's just playing smart, team-oriented Apex, just play tight together. Don't try to overextend on things you can't get, and just take advantage of a meta that allows you to play zone. Because I think at the end of the day, like, again, it's very hard to kill teams quick. It's very hard to fight on edge at times in this meta. So take advantage of that. And maybe hopefully just have a little bit of zone luck on your side at the same time.
Also, you should probably make sure you don't buy their jersey, because last time you bought a jersey from a Reed's team, it just didn't go well.
We won't bring that up.
So. Yeah, I mean,
we don't got to go into it.
The oxygen jersey from hell. I mean, it was just.
Yeah, I don't think that thing's gonna come out of the closet anytime. So we're gonna have to leave that in there, because I think that might be what knocked my power out the other day. Who knows, man? I don't even know. That thing is cursed beyond belief,
people try to say that Jay, when he's on stream, has like a jersey curse, but I feel like Donnie might actually legitimately have a jersey curse. Like some of the things that have happened in his jersey
people are going to respect anything I've said for the past 2 hours now you've said that. Come on, man.
You just don't buy jerseys. That's what it
just don't buy jerseys, I guess.
Just don't buy jerseys,
I just will stop supporting the esports.
Honestly,
I don't know, man.
Honestly, I mean, Jumba just says things sometimes in the opposite.
Listen, we can all say what we want about Donnie and all. It was one jersey, right? And Oxygen at that point was kind of starting to trend down, even prior to that LAN. I feel like I came on this pod and was saying like, I'm starting to worry about some Oxygen stuff. And I'm someone who's, I think, compared to most people, is incredibly high in Oxygen. But Jumba in LA buys a DZ jersey and he buys a DSG jersey, and he puts on the DSG jersey, I believe, to start the tournament. Dark Zero goes crazy and DSG does terrible. I think it's around game 5. Jumba takes off the DZ jersey or the DSG jersey, puts on the Dark Zero one, right? So Dark Zero's killing it and DSG's sucking. The next game, Dark Zero hits match point, sure, but disguised win the game when Jumba has taken the jersey off, and then Dark Zero have that infamous game where they could close out the LAN over at Overlook, and Jen Burton doesn't get a great smoke down. Coifel absolutely rips Zero, and DZ loses the LAN, and and then we see Reject win. From Jumba taking the jersey off, Dark Zero proceeds to do bad, and DSG proceeds to do good when he swaps the jerseys. Here's the even crazier part. To build on this further, going into EWC, Jumba has a multitude of jerseys, okay? And he brings all of them to the LAN in case he wants to wear them, like to root for some teams, right? Including the DSG and Dark Zero jerseys. The one jersey he owns that he forgot to bring was Alliance,
Oh
and
my
they go
God,
on
dude.
to win the whole thing. So Jumba has said many times, because it's in my chat when I do stream, which I haven't streamed in a long time, because obviously when I stream, it's usually just watch parties. But when I do stream, my chat loves to say that I have a jersey curse, blah, 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 because I always wear jerseys and I always predict who I think is going to win the day. Sometimes the teams I wear do bad. Sometimes they do good. With Jumba, without fail, every time there has been some sort of thing relating to the jersey he's wearing doing bad, and the jersey he happens to forget to bring, they end up winning the whole tournament. So all I'm saying is I think Jumba has a jersey curse.
I think Jumba not only has a jersey curse, I think sometimes he's just a curse. Like, we also watched the Leafs Bruins game 7 in the crowd. Like, we're in the crowd watching it. I have a feeling if I don't pull the game out, the Leafs maybe win that. But I pulled it out and we were watching the Leafs score, and literally like a minute later, Boston ties it, and then they end up winning the game in over. Like, it's just like, you know, it's just one of those things with Jumba. He might legit, when people say it, I'm always like, nah, you know, you're fun. Every time Jumba brings one up, I'm like, yeah, that checks out. Like, you might be the curse. I don't know. Like, it's just, you know. So Donnie, don't feel too bad. It could be you could have the Jumba curse. You
Might
could
not
have
be
the
you.
Jumba curse.
It may not be me. You still want guests to come on this podcast, man. I don't know if we want to keep bringing that up. I'm just saying.
Listen, we've notoriously been a good thing, I think, for players after they come on.
There is
usually
pod buff. There has
been a pod buff. Now, ladies and gents,
Wait.
that should just about do it for Group A. Jay,
Who have you guys had recently? What were the guests? You had Kurev.
Yeah.
Who was before that?
It's been a long time. Let me look.
We got to keep note of the pod buff. Like, who's been on recently? Who do we need to be keeping track of?
Let me look.
You know, moving forward. Just saying.
We've had Monsoon.
Oh, Monsoon.
Like more recently.
That's a big
Monsoon
one.
got the charge rifle buff. So
that's a big one.
It's a good time to be Monsoon. No
I mean,
doubt.
the man got his name mentioned in the patch notes. Like, I don't know. Like, it's pretty clear who they were gearing that towards.
He's got the Gibby. The Mastiff isn't as good as it was, but you know, he can still get it done. Nah, it's a good time to be Monsoon.
I don't think anybody was asking for that charge rifle change except for maybe Monsoon, and they gave it to him. So, like, he's eating. Life is good.
Not to mention the fact that before Monsoon, it was Kimchi. So there might just be a big complexity buff. It might just be a huge complexity. Throw all your chips down on complexity heading into Japan. But ladies and gents, that should just about do it for Group A. Those were all of the 10 teams in Group A. Now, boys, I guess the one question is, do we want to hit a heart-to-heart, or do we just call it here because it's the mini-sodes that went an hour and 30 minutes long? What do we want to do? E?
Whatever works.
Do you have a preference?
Well, I mean, let's do it.
You want to rip it? All right, ladies and gents, we're going to hit a quick ad, and then on the other side, we're going to round it out with the quick heart-to-heart. Let's get it. All right, ladies and gents. We have heart-to-heart time. It's been a long while, ladies and gents. I know we've been inconsistent, but it's just been a weird time in Apex. So fucking long since we've had anything to really talk about here. But we are back, and hopefully back to being consistent. I'm going to kick it off with the heart-to-heart this week. Once again, like I said, had a birthday. Also had one of the weirdest instances with my truck, the last 2 days. I was getting swindled hardcore. I was getting swindled. They told me there was 5 things wrong with my car today. And when they were like, it won't start, your head gasket's blown, which is like a big repair. Like, if you don't know anything about cars, like a head gasket, if it gets blown, a lot of times you just got to get a new vehicle because it's that devastating. It's just a lot of money. I'm like, what are you talking about? I brought it in for a battery. I wanted you to look at my battery, see if something was wrong with the connection. And went back there. Of course, like magic, it just happened to start when I walked back there. Like, oh, I don't know. I guess it started this time. And then I was able to drive it home, and they were going to charge me like $5,000 to fix something that didn't need to be fixed. I checked if there was a head gasket. I brought it to other people who knew what they were talking about. Not a head gasket. So almost got swindled. Thank God I didn't allow that to happen. And I have my truck for now. So that's my heart-to-heart was dealing with that all day. Just annoying. Car stuff is so annoying. Like, you want to talk about the most annoying things to deal with in daily life, it's got to be car stuff. When stuff is going wrong with the car, it's just aggravating. It's annoying as shit. But other than that, it was good. It was a good day. Somebody brought me a cheesecake on my birthday. It's badass. Who wants to go next? Donnie? Donnie, I'm making you do it.
That works. I was just, I don't think I have a choice. I think in tradition, it seems like of this podcast, and having met E for the first time tonight, I would say just grateful, man.
Yeah.
We're at the grateful.
Yes, sir.
It's no, but honestly though, like for two things, and I'll make it quick. One, just honestly, competitive Apex being back. I think that ALGS right around the corner. I think that is ultimately what a lot of people look toward for the best part of the Apex season, and I think that, especially where a lot of people say the game is pretty down right now, I do think there's still some things on the horizon that this game can easily bounce back. It's just in terms of popularity, because I really don't think the state of the game is too bad as people kind of over exaggerate at times. But I do think that with Champs coming up, being in Japan, the crowds over there are going to be insane. They're talking about over 30K tickets being sold. It's going to make for a great time for everybody that's going there. I'm definitely excited just to even watch it from home. So yeah, I think just grateful for that, and also grateful for a dad that does electrical work, because my power went out the other night, and it is again 0 degrees here where I live, and so that electrical included the furnace going out. Woke up to it being 51 degrees in my house, which is cold. It is very cold for a person to live at a 51 degree house. So, but he got that fixed within 24 hours. So shout out to my father, Jim Kirk, for not having me freeze to death. So appreciate that. So just ripping grateful all over the place. So
shout out Jim Kirk. Jay.
I don't mean to indulge in the Apex meme that has become everybody says they're grateful, but I am grateful. And I genuinely mean this, because I've actually been thinking about this over probably the last month. I think the amount of negativity that I've seen online in regards to Apex has almost made me flip on like the opposite side of it. Like I've started to try and look at things in a lot more of a positive light. And I'm not talking about like, in terms of the game itself, but just all the things that I have been able to do because of this game, all the great memories. Like even when I'm just working on videos, like editing and like rewatching a LAN from 5 months ago, like I really love this game. I love this game. It's given me some lifelong friends, and you guys, the GMB boys, Jumba. Like, it's been really awesome. All the things that the game has afforded me. I've gotten to travel the world because of this video game. I don't know. I just really do think that the whole narrative of like the Apex dying thing. First off, I don't believe that it is. I do think that there's going to be some big changes in the future. This is not me like having any inside information, but I really do just believe that. I don't believe that the game studio is not hearing the current feedback and is not going to try and make major changes to shift the narrative, right? But in terms of just all the stuff when it comes to, everybody's talking about it dying, it almost makes me kind of sad. Like I don't like seeing the current state that, people hold the opinion of it, because of all the positive memories that I do have with this game. I still enjoy playing it. I know, Wyatt, you've talked about it many times. Like playing it in moderation for me, I think has brought me more enjoyment out of it. Like when I used to, back in the day, I used to be grinding like 24/7 only Apex, but with life responsibilities, with all the different things, like other games like Marvel Rivals coming out, when I do play Apex, I still have an absolute blast. And I'm hoping that, like Enoch says, better days are still ahead. Because I truly do love this game, and I love the community that has been built, and I love all the people I've been able to meet through it. And I'm very grateful for Apex Legends in a time where it seems like a lot of people are almost celebrating the potential downfall.
Yeah, it's a weird time. It's like people almost want it to, even though there's a lot of like livelihoods that people have generated from the game. The one thing that always makes me laugh though is like the videos on Twitter of like sad music, and they're at the uninstall page, and they're putting all these clips in the background. It's like, hey bro, you can leave the game on your computer and just not play it. Like that is an option. Like you don't have to do this whole grandstanding. I already made a tweet about it a while ago, but I probably would have already talked about it had we been more consistent recently. But I just think that's so ridiculous.
Those so funny, because like even when Apex was at its absolute peak, for example, season 6, I played less than 10 total games. season 3 through 5. Like I played a bit of season 1 and 2, but like season 3 through 5 was when I became like a hard Apex grinder. And then there's just something about season 6 I just didn't vibe with. I wasn't announcing to my group chat that I was retiring. We just didn't really play it. Season 7 comes around, the boys were back. We were locked on Apex for the next like 7 straight seasons. You know what I mean? So like sometimes you just take a break from the game and then they drop some super fire update in the future. And then, you're back on the game. So, yeah, I do think it's a little ridiculous, everybody that's announcing they're retiring from the game. I've never retired from a single video game in my entire life.
Nope.
Like, I just stopped playing it one day, and then maybe I'll play it again in the future. Who knows?
Yeah. Like, I haven't played Madden 07 in, like, many, many years, but that was one of my favorite games of all time. I was, like, listening to the soundtrack the other night because I played that game so much. I never retired. It was just Madden 08 came out. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's just one of those situations where things like that happen. But if somebody walked in right now with the PlayStation 2 and said, hey, I got Madden 07, you best believe I'm making a fantasy draft and I'm going to be playing that game and singing all the songs from the soundtrack on there. I do think, like Jay said too, if you are really struggling with where this game is at, I seriously urge you to just take like some time to play other games. I know, like, I'm a little bit older. Obviously, I'm about to be in my 30s, but like when I was younger, you had like 10 games that you played and you cycled through them. And it was like, oh, even if you weren't like like you didn't have the ability to have that many games, you at least had, 3 or 4 that you could play and cycle through. And you kind of just had a good time, playing those different games. And I feel like what happened with gaming is it got so competitive, but also like there's so much money in it that people kind of just attach themselves to one game to try and, reach whatever max potential they could with that. But it's like when me and Jay, usually we play one day a week throughout the week for the other show. And when we play, the vibes are great. Like we're feeling good. We're having a good time. And it just reminds you that this game is awesome when you don't have somebody in your ear telling you that it's not. So yeah, I really do urge, if you're struggling right now, just play something else, man. Single player, maybe even just a different style of game, and you will have yourself a good time when you finally do come back or decide that you want to play again. So I just urge people to do that if you're really struggling. Your final heart-to-heart, the final one for this show.
I'm going to go with something, especially today, any amount of like experience that, or at least I will say, I'm not going to say for everybody, but I will say I found in my own personal life that anytime I have an experience that leads me to want to go to a negative emotional state is just something that is trying to take away my joy. And just because the thing happens externally doesn't mean that I inherently have to let go of my joy to be upset about it. Like I've been getting stream sniped by this piece of shit cheater for 2 days straight, but I know it's literally just a test to see if I will like give up my joy because I have this piece of shit trying to grief my games. And so I know that there is a version of myself that deals with the exact same circumstances and never lets go of it. I'm not there yet. I was getting a little tilted, a little annoyed. I mean, bro, this bitch just lands, drops the low ball, and then is just aimbotting with an R301. And just, I'm talking hours straight. Like this guy, I mean, I genuinely hope he finds something better to do. But like at the end of the day, I shouldn't let that steal my joy, because even while experiencing that, if I take a broader view of my life, I have an abundance of things that I have to be grateful for and that I can have joy in, that for me to let go of that joy so I can be pissed off about this loser, it's just silly. And one day I'm going to stop making that silly choice.
There we go. Well, ladies and gents, thank you guys for tuning in. As always, it is a pleasure to be back. I think Jumba, he's got some things going on right now, but he should be back soon as well. Hopefully on one of these so-called mini-sodes with us talking about everything going into the LAN. So thank you guys for tuning in as
Jumba
always.
Real quick.
What's up?
I don't know if I assume this would be fine for me to say. I know that Jumba has certain commitments on a very specific video that has to come out like as of recording, like tomorrow.
Yeah.
and he literally just like went on vacation in New York and all this crazy stuff. And like there was somewhat of a lack of communication from the it's a sponsors party that was, you know, didn't really communicate great for him. And so he's working on an incredibly stressful, tight deadline. And I've talked with him for a few calls the last few days, and he's very much like, I got 5 minutes. Like, I got to get back into the thick of it. What are we talking about? You know,
He's on that deadline.
Bro is in the hot seat.
Yeah,
right?
like
Yeah.
I know that he was stressed when he's like, we were talking, I think, on Sunday, and he's like, I got to get a video done by Wednesday. Haven't even finished the script, and I was like, oh shoot, like that's tough. Like, because you got a script, you got to get all your assets, you got to edit everything. Like this man is like, he's grinding. So
Yeah, so he should be back soon. I mean, he has to be. At the end of the day, the video has to get done by tomorrow. So I mean, he should be back soon. Thank you guys for tuning in as always. And we are psyched that Japan is just around the corner. Plenty of stuff coming with that as well. So thank you guys for tuning in as always. We'll catch you guys next week. See ya.
See you.